Welcome to Zoom In Zoom Out. I'm Irene Lin. China is home to roughly 12 million Catholics, a group Human Rights Watch says is under increasing pressure from Beijing. Although the Vatican does not officially recognize Beijing, it does have an agreement with China on the appointment of bishops. Human Rights Watch says this 2018 pact has only facilitated the oppression of Catholics in China, restricting their movement and giving rise to increased surveillance of underground churches and forced adoption of Communist Party teaching. For more on this, we're now joined by Yalkun Uluyol, China researcher at Human Rights Watch. Welcome to the show, Yalkun.
Yeah, thank you.
Yalkun, I want to start with when Xi Jinping took presidency. Beijing's attitude towards religion has changed quite a lot since then. Can you explain how it has changed and the effect it has had on communities?
So, religious communities in China are under repression for a long time, but I think since Xi Jinping came to power, the increasing escalation of religious repression is more evident, both from people's testimonies and also from the official documents that we have reviewed. Especially this month marks 10-year anniversary of the Intensifying campaign initiated by the Xi Jinping in 2016, which basically calls for all religions to follow the Han-centric Chinese Communist Party ideology, and therefore synthesize them into party ideology and also for religions to have Chinese characteristics. But although it seems like the Chinese government wants religions to be more compatible with the Chinese culture and history, but in actual practice, it's more about inducing and imposing Communist Party ideology into religion and religious communities in China. Not only because Xi Jinping's Intensifying campaign since 2016, but also the Holy See China Agreement in 2018, which basically ended long dispute over bishop appointments. The Chinese government has used this agreement to facilitate more crackdown on underground communities who basically pledge loyalty only to the Pope, to pressure them to join the official Church of China.
Could you give us some background about the Chinese Catholic Patriotic Association and its relationship to broader organized religion in China?
This government-run Patriotic Association is kind of the entity that controls anything to do with Catholicism in China. For example, they are responsible for synthesization of Catholicism. They are responsible for church management. They are responsible for education of priests, and they are responsible for all kinds of religious activities and also control and all that. And they are basically the function of the government to control people who would like to worship at churches. And they cannot do it without government control and without government imposing Communist Party ideology on them. And that is the role of that association. And Chinese government always claims that Catholicism in China is independent, even from Vatican. So that is quite interesting as well. So anyone who is going beyond that circle or beyond the government control, then they are not recognized by the Chinese government.
Going back to the 2018 agreement, from what you explained in your report, it seems that Chinese authorities have distorted it. Can you talk about how the agreement has been implemented over the past 8 years?
The Chinese government only allows worshippers to, practice their religion in officially permitted sites, and therefore, Catholics who are part of the government-run Chinese Catholic Patriotic Association is the only recognized church in China. So if churches are not part of this patriotic association, then they are not recognized by Beijing and therefore subjected to persecution, repression, and intimidation and harassment because they pledge loyalty only to the Pope, not the Chinese Communist Party. So that separates the official, church from the underground church community. And what 2018 agreement did was it kind of facilitated the crackdown on underground church communities because, according to Catholics that I have interviewed, the Chinese government promoted the agreement as a call from Vatican for underground communities to join the official communities. And that is part one of the problem. And the other problem is that, the agreement is about bishop appointments. Basically, Beijing coming up with candidates to Vatican and candidate approving those bishops' candidacy from Beijing and to appoint them to dioceses across China. But the problem is when the agreement is in place, no underground church bishops would be replaced by Pope because they would not be put forward for candidacy in Beijing because they are not recognized by Beijing. So it comes down to the question that underground church leaders, elderly bishops, when they age and die, there will not be new bishops coming to their churches, and therefore the Chinese government pressured the new leader of the community to join the official church. Otherwise, they will not have bishops appointed by the Vatican. So in the long term, that would pose an existential threat to underground Catholic community because they would not have new bishops appointed by Vatican, which was possible before the 2018 agreement. But we have also, talked to underground church community members who are now in exile. Some said, they had no other choice but to join the official church because of harassment, intimidation, arrest, and arbitrary detention of their church members, priests, and clergy. And after they joined the official church, then they continue to face surveillance, control, ideological training, and also travel restrictions because of the strict regulations in China. In December 2025, authorities adopted a regulation which basically requires all clergy to submit their travel documents to authorities. And even for personal travels, they have to now seek permission from the authorities, right? And therefore, they, kind of restricts Chinese Catholics' interaction with abroad, and also the authorities also, ban and restricts foreigners from conducting religious activities in China. So there is this disconnection from Chinese Catholics from the rest of the world, and the agreement on bishop appointments is basically cutting ties of the underground community from Vatican officially and posing them an existential threat for their continuation in the long run.
So the underground communities, Catholics refusing to pledge loyalty to the Chinese Communist Party, what did you find out about these people and their communities?
Underground communities in China have existed for a long time, and they had their bishops appointed by the Pope, even if they are not recognized by the Chinese government. Many of the bishops have been subjected to persecution. They've been arbitrarily arrested, imprisoned. Some of them still remain missing. Some of them are subjected to house arrest and so on. And these are regular people on the ground who refuse to pledge loyalty to the Chinese Communist Party and who are faithful only to the Pope. And they, refuse government control over their religious activities, their teachings, and so on. Therefore, they want to remain as underground communities, to await the Chinese government's control over their religious conduct and faith. And we have underground Protestant communities, we have underground Catholic communities who refuse to join the Patriotic Association, right? And most of them are in rural areas spread across China. And all they do, honestly, and all they want is to practice their faith independently from the state interference, and which is their right and fundamental freedom to religious, which is their fundamental right to religious freedom. But that is definitely not respected by the Chinese government. And one other, I think, important element is that after the bishops' agreement in 2018, Chinese government has several times breached the agreement, violated the agreement by unilaterally appointing bishops. Although in theory, according to the agreement, Vatican would have veto power over the bishop appointments, but no pope has exercised that power. And Pope Leo continues to, approve Beijing's appointments, and he has approved 5 appointments since he came to office last May.
So the Vatican hasn't exercised its power to veto China's appointment of bishops. Do these underground communities feel betrayed by the Vatican?
People interviewed said, since 2018, the Chinese government has used the agreement as a ground for overreaching structure to pressure underground communities to join the official church, right? So when the underground communities refuse to do so, they pressure them, they detain priests, they subject them to house arrest, they intimidate and harass communities. And one of them said they had no other choice but to join the official church after their church was demolished, its cross removed, and its members threatened and arrested. Another one also told us that the Chinese government is using the agreement as an intelligent weapon to legally destroy the underground church because, senior underground bishops under persecution for years have died or been replaced by officially appointed bishops. So, just want to make that point clear. Underground communities are not going to have new bishops because according to the agreement, all bishops Vatican is going to approve will be, proposed by Beijing. If Beijing does not propose any candidacy, then Vatican does not, cannot appoint bishops to those churches. Therefore, underground communities feel betrayed by the Vatican as there has not been a confrontation from Vatican about persecution of underground church communities in China, and apparently the new Pope continues to approve new appointments from Beijing.
Yalkun, how does China control the official and underground communities? China notably has a lot of mechanisms for surveillance. Does that play a role here?
In recent years, we have observed intensifying ideological control of clergy, priests, and bishops in China. In some locations, clergy are subjected to ideological training as frequently as twice a week. And since 2018 and since citizenization, also since 2018, the Chinese government has been strictly preventing children from entering church premises. Basically, as one Catholic told me, to cut generational ties within the community. So children is not only barred from church premises, and now the government is also asking schools to ask children whether their parents teach them anything related to religion at home, which is basically, overreaching government control, even of their conducts at home, and even if the parents want to pass on some of their knowledge to the children when it comes to religion. So that is evident in one of the internal documents that we have reviewed, but the Chinese government did not answer our question about the internal document, which basically bans children from even receiving religious education at home. And I think one other important dimension to this is that we have the underground church community who is facing persecution, their priests and bishops subjected to arrest, detention, harassment, and all that. But at the same time, the official churches who are recognized by the Chinese government are also facing intensifying ideological control, strict surveillance, travel restrictions, that the clergies are facing, and all that. All of that are also violation of their fundamental rights to religious freedom. So the Vatican should urgently review its 2018 agreement with Beijing, and concerned governments should raise the situation of Catholics along with other religious communities in China and press Chinese government to respect religious freedom across the country.
Yalkun, it's been great having you on the show today. This has been Zoom In, Zoom Out. If you enjoyed today's episode, please make sure to like, subscribe, or even leave a comment down below. Thanks for watching. Until next time.